Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Samson is Doing Something podcast. This time, a live episode, a reaction breaking news episode, because Brandon Ingram, for the first time since 2019-20, has returned to All-Star status. He was named as an injury replacement for Team USA after Steph Curry, I believe, announced that he would not be participating. Is it a little bit sad that we don't get to see Steph launching in the All-Star game? Sure. But Brandon Ingram, who, when he came to the Raptors, said he wanted to return to All-Star status. And as far as like we're talking about the Raptors, that is exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to put this guy in a position where he can return to this game. He can return to a status that he is, he's viewed himself as. And a huge part of this is that the Raptors are a winning team. A huge part of this is that Brandon Ingram has stayed healthy. And a huge part of this is that the Raptors, they use him in a way where he benefits other players. And if you look at his stats, so when and keep in mind, it's a smaller or a bigger offensive environment than it used to be. That means players are more efficient now, teams score more points. Efficiency isn't what it used to be if you're a 57% true shooting player. Brandon Ingram is a guy who, the last time he was an All-Star, he averaged 24 points per game, 4 assists, 6 rebounds, and did it on plus efficiency back then. He was the most improved player. He was an All-Star that year. And this year he's coming in at 22 points per game, 3.7 assists, 5.8 rebounds, and around 57% true shooting. That is just a smidge under league average. Now, the big thing here, the big, bold, beautiful thing about Brandon Ingram is that he is hugely correlated with the Raptors turnaround. Now, you could go into on-off numbers. You could go into some of the more, I guess, I wouldn't say, well, on-offs and say like, hey, the Raptors are actually better when Brandon is off the floor. You can make those cases. But the big thing here is that Brandon, I think, has been extremely selfless in what he's done for the Raptors. So the easy numbers, I gave them to you, his box score numbers, but there are some advanced stats that don't like Brandon. I'd like to add some context that does, because I think a lot of the responses you go to is, his box score plus minus, his EPM, on-offs, all that kind of stuff, and you say he's not efficient. What is he doing? Well, I'll tell you what he's doing for one. He is stepping into an offense, and he is paid, of course, to give you 22 points per game. He's, of course, paid to create shots. And I've gone into all of the film before and did it in a past episode where we were looking at like why doesn't the team make shots when Brandon passes them the ball? And they do. They shoot poorly when he passes them the ball. His assist numbers could go up. Of course, this is something that the Raptors have to hope just comes around. His assist numbers go up, and he'll also be a guy who, he makes more of his own shots. But the big thing here is he is paid to score 22 points per game, but he's also paid to occupy the best defender game in and game out. This is a massive thing for the Raptors. This Raptors team last season was top 5 in the quality of shots that they took. That's what the number said, based on where they took their shots from. And they were still a terrible offense. The big thing that Brandon Ingram does is he absorbs, I think, like a large chunk of the most difficult shots on the floor, and is able to not only make a decent amount of them, but is able to use his gravity to allow other players easier shots. Do I think that Scotty Barnes' quite large uptick in efficiency this year compared to last year is simply just improvement? I think the defensive improvement is his own, but I think the offensive stuff is largely a product of playing next to Brandon Ingram, being a little bit more comfortable. RJ Barrett, the exact same thing. When you look at Emmanuel Quickley, for example, too, this is a guy who is second in the NBA in wide open threes, 6+ feet. The closest defender is away from him. He's only behind Royce O'Neal on the Phoenix Suns, that's part of the scheme of how defenses want to guard that team. Quickley is a tremendous shooter who's been getting a bunch of wide open shots. Brandon Ingram, he helps a lot with that. He passes quite often to a wide open Emmanuel Quickley, and the Raptors, they have to hope that, hey, those kind of shots are going to go in more often in the future, because he's still shooting pretty poorly when Brandon passes him the ball. On top of that, Brandon is very essential to the Raptors' defense. This is a huge swing because the Raptors obviously were last year, a terrible, terrible team. They only won, that was kind of like a Trumpism. They were not a good team. They won 30 games. around 30 games, and they came around on defense, but their offense was absolutely horrible. The big thing here is that Brandon plays a bunch of games, IQ plays a bunch of games, Scotty plays a bunch of games. CMB has been fun. Jamal Shed has been better. Everyone has played a little bit better. They've just missed RJ instead of quickly, I guess, as a comparison. Jakob also hasn't played that much. But in changing from a team that wanted to be big at the outset of the season, they wanted to play Jakob at center. They wanted to play Scotty at the 4, Brandon at the 3, RJ at the 2, quickly at the 1. This is a huge team, and they had ideas about loosing Brandon Ingram out in transition to get him easier buckets. So, what happens? Jakob Poeltl has hardly played any of the games. The games that he did play, he looked significantly limited. So, as a result, what do the Raptors do? They have to play small. What happens with Brandon Ingram when they play small? Is he hung out to dry? Does that put him in a worse spot? Well, he has a career high block percentage because he's helping out around the rim more often. And maybe even more important than that, I know his contested rebound rate is far higher now than it's ever been in his career. There are little intricacies of what Brandon Ingram adds to this team that are really important. And the fact that they are a small team and have been playing as such, and guys like Scotty and CMB have to box out, Mamu has to box out, and Brandon, who's a decent leaper with, those go-go gadget arms, can jump in and go get rebounds. It's incredibly meaningful that he goes back to help out and help them close out defensive possessions. Going even further, what does that mean for his usage? Again, the Raptors are a team that they don't have traditionally great on-ball creation. How do they get some of these churned, easy possessions, right? For example, Steph Curry, when he comes off of a screen, scoring .988 points per possession. He has 4.2 of those a game. He's the second most in the league behind Lauri Markkanen. A little bit lower down, fifth in off-ball screen usage before scoring, is Brandon Ingram, 2.6 a game, .963. Very similar efficiency to a Steph Curry insofar as scoring. His playmaking isn't as powerful there. But you look at the comparisons here, Lauri Markkanen, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Michael Porter Jr., Brandon Ingram, that's the top 5 in off-ball screen usage. Okay. Brandon Ingram, a guy who is so used to operating on ball, a guy who is, used to being the hub of an offense and really making sure that we're seeing a team that is run spread pick and roll, that he gets to attack the basket, that he gets to do all this kind of stuff. This is a guy who's now being relegated to a role where he is coming off of screens, he's coming off of pin downs for the health of the Raptors offense. It's not necessarily his greatest strength, but it is a function of the Raptors offense that they need him to fulfill, and he fulfills it. Roughly to the efficiency of a Steph Curry this season. And you can see here too, the reason why they like using him off ball so much in this against the Pacers, he has Pascal Siakam, 38 feet, 40 feet away from the rim. And so they get to run an empty side pick and roll in a 4-on-4 concept. And Grady Dick just gets to do a little hot stove screen and go to the rim. This and spacing concerns show up a lot more if this is in 5-on-5 sequence, because you'd have another helper. You'd be able to cover the corner. The guy would be able to come up and meet Grady earlier. It's harder for teams to navigate this kind of stuff with fewer players. And Brandon, this is one example, brings Pascal, who's a very strong defender, way above the break, and they just get to operate 4-on-4. It's incredibly important. And also, when we look at Brandon and what he's supposed to do in terms of taking on these doubles, he's been one of the most often doubled players in the NBA over the past however many games. He is supposed to move the ball on, trust his teammates. They have not gotten as much, points per possession out of this kind of stuff as they need to. They've not been able to score as often as they should, but he still keeps the ball moving. He still creates, strong possessions. He still creates strong shots. And that's the crux of it, you guys. Brandon Ingram comes onto this team, creates advantages, takes difficult shots, helps out on the defensive glass, and as a weak side rim protector, and he takes the most difficult matchup night in and night out. It is a little bit of a thankless job on this team as far as the stats go. That's what I see when I watch it. This is not an easy job in terms of stats, and they don't like him. The stats don't like him. You have to go and look a little bit deeper for a guy like Brandon Ingram, why he's able to provide what he can for this Raptors team. And honestly, he is not totally the only reason that this Raptors team has turned around. There's been a bunch of things like Scotty Barnes entering Defensive Player of the Year conversations is massive. Colin Murray-Boyles being, a productive NBA player his first season is massive. Jamal Shed in year 2, same thing. Healthy Emmanuel Quickly is, I think, very, very important to what the Raptors need to do, is insofar as spacing and just being competent at the guard position. And they've navigated an injury to Jakob Poeltl. These things, it's pretty impressive that they are where they are. And while the numbers, on-offs, all those other ones, I'm repeating myself, don't necessarily point a giant shining light towards Brandon Ingram as an all-star, he has the significant cachet of being, one of among players, the favorites. People love watching his play. People love watching his shot making. And the fact that players really value, and I think the people who watch game in and game out really value someone who draws heaps and heaps of attention. It's the Raptors, they have this, it's kind of like Scotty Barnes is seen really well in the analytics, but his box score isn't as punchy as some people might like. And that's kind of a comparison to, a Kyle Lowry. And then we have, people comparing DeMar DeRozan and Ingram in here. And I know Ingram probably hasn't had a box score as good as DeMar has had in his career. However, Brandon Ingram is currently in the midst of a defensive season that DeMar has never been able to have, and largely because of his extra size and his length. And I think the big thing, too, is that when offense-first players show that they not only can exist, but thrive within defensive contexts, such as the Raptors, a team that leads with defense, a team that leads with effort, then we're looking at a guy he's really cooking with gas, because not only is there the real gritty, small contextual stuff that I'm laying out here that helps the Raptors go, but there's the big stuff, which is he joins a team, they go from terrible to good. They're the 5th seed right now, right? They go from being a lottery contender to probably not a playoff contender, but a playoff team with a silver bullet. Or with a bullet, I should say. This stuff, narratively, is very compelling. And you see him play good defense. You see him take the most important matchup. You see him fit in with his team. You see that he's well beloved. How do you turn that away? Of course, there are other players who have significant cases as well. Brandon Ingram, if he was like more gangbusters from downtown, if he was getting that volume a little bit higher, if, God forbid, his teammates made a few more shots when he makes the pass, these numbers could have been a bit more robust. Even his advanced analytics could have been so. But that's not the case. He still found his way there. There's a lot of talented players in this league. And, injuries are never a good thing in the NBA. But the injury replacements, I always thought that the All-Star teams should be 15 and 15, that we should be seeing 30 All-Stars every year. And the injury replacements get us closer to that. And even though, I'd love to see Steph launching away, that's not going to be the case. But Brandon is a guy who we're going to see a couple possessions of him going up and down, getting a shot, maybe some boogie-woogie with a guy in the post. Bob's your uncle, Becky's your aunt. He gets to be an all-star. This is a big deal. The Raptors last year, obviously, trading what the pick is now traded to the Clippers potentially, but a very valuable pick. It didn't seem that valuable at the time the Pacers would go into the finals. It looked like the Raptors traded the 23rd, 24th overall pick, or what would have been that in a draft, plus Bruce Brown, plus Kelly Olynyk for Brandon Ingram. Obviously, the pick has become a lot more valuable, but that doesn't matter as much as the fact that the Raptors went out hunting for an all-star, a guy who would pair well with the Raptors, a guy who would be competitive, a guy who would help turn the team around, a guy who would help put other players properly in the hierarchy of how they wanted to play. And he, not only does Scotty make all-star and looks really strong doing so, but Scotty, some of that usage passes over to Brandon. He gets to be more efficient. He gets to focus more on defense. And Brandon shoulders that load. Scotty's rewarded as an all-star first, Brandon after. This is only I think the 7th time that the Raptors have had 2 all-stars at the same time. The last time, obviously, was 2019-20 with Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry. This is a cool thing. Now, are the expectations for the team going to be higher? I do think so, because so much of the conversation around this team was, at least from analysts, I know analysts in Toronto, analysts elsewhere, is like, it's tough to see them breaking out of the first round. Now you have 2 all-stars. You have to be able, you have to be able to break out of the first round if you have 2 all-stars. The pressure is mounting. But as I said, in my past work with Lewis, the past couple weeks, there is tremendous opportunity for this Raptors team, not only to improve, but to improve where their stars are considered. Most teams, I think, find themselves asking for, more from role players, especially at this point in the year. You say, like, well, our star is doing so much. And the Raptors stars are doing a lot. But there is, I think, a really compelling case to not only expect Brandon Ingram to be a better shooter, but his assists to look a lot better, for him to have less turnovers, for him to be more involved in the offense in a way that is featuring him more similarly to what we saw in New Orleans. That, yes, the Raptors will still use him as a hub for their off-screen stuff. They will still leverage all of the attention he gets, but also we're going to see, probably with the return of Jakob Poeltl, a return of more pick-and-roll possessions for a guy like Brandon Ingram. And Scotty Barnes, we'll see if he gets more of those transitional lineups with guys like Mamu. If Brandon is paired well with Jakob, then Scotty will get a little bit more Mamu time. We'll get more of these 5-out on-ball possessions. And these guys they might be able to, if the Raptors really find some footing offensively. It's not going to be their role players who see their uptick in numbers. I think it will be their stars. So it's not that often that a guy is a first-time All-Star or a second-time All-Star like Scotty, and you see it go up in the second half. It's not often that you see a guy like Brandon go up in the second half. It's not often that you see 2 guys on the same team. But my prediction is that both these guys' box score numbers will actually be better in I know it's not really second half. It's like the third of the season. But I think they might be able to do so. I find it very compelling. There's still a lot of meat on the bone in how these guys can be used. And honestly, I'm just happy for Brandon. He's a guy who's fought through, all kinds of injuries, right? He's a guy who's, he's had to deal with a lot in terms of that kind of stuff. He even had, blood clots, things of that nature. That's tough. He is constantly rededicated himself to the game. Everybody who covers him, all the coaches, all the players, everyone who comes into his orbit says that he works so hard, that he's like that next level type of worker. He's beloved for the style of his game. And he is a hoop junkie, is what everyone calls him, right? Bobby called him a hooper super. Again, I think Masai said he's a hoop junkie when he first came over. And these guys, the guys who really dedicate themselves to basketball, it's cool to see them rewarded with these types of games, because these are the guys who these types of games really matter to. Brandon was disappointed not to be selected into the All-Star game. He was. Brandon, this means a lot to him. The reaction video is incredible. It's just jubilation for him, for the team. Coach Darko was saying how disappointed he was that he wasn't rewarded. And now he is. And the Raptors are sitting there with 2 All-Stars for the first time in 6 years. So it's cool to see. Make sure to like the video. This is supposed to be just a quick thing that I wanted people to have, just talking about it. I think he's done a really good job. His shot making has helped the Raptors a lot. His presence on the roster helps them a lot. And he's eating innings and he's carrying a load that is not necessarily seen in the stats, but you look a little deeper and you can see how it's positive and how it helps out his teammates. And I'm glad that they're able to win when he's not on the floor either. Those minutes are important too. There you go. And also, clutch shooting. It can get better for Brandon, much better. I'm looking forward to that in the back third of the season. My fingers are crossed for it. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure to like the video, comment if you want. Let me know what you think about BI making the All-Star team. I really appreciate everyone for stopping in. Brandon Ingram, two-time All-Star. Scotty Barnes, two-time All-Star. Raptors, 5th seed with a date against the probably heavily suspended Detroit Pistons on the morrow. Dwight McPhee says BI has been a character addition. He's been he's well beloved in the locker room. Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.